Well, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us. Well, we're going to talk about the importance of financial education, but first, vaccines, they really do matter. Back after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
I'll tell you, we live in a vaccine world. They are in the news virtually every day. They keep you healthy. They're important as diet and as exercise. Joining me to talk about a variety of aspects about vaccines is Dr. Cynthia Demuth. And she's on the board of trustees with the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. So I practice as a primary care pediatrician, so that's my perspective.
Okay, and that's important for us to know. All right, well, first of all, let's talk about the significance of the myths and information surrounding vaccines.
So there are many ways that people can get some wrong information about vaccines. Misinformation might just be what they heard from a friend, what they saw on social media, or what they saw on the internet. And
there's a lot of news out there.
There is. And some of this information is not good, and it may lead to parents questioning whether vaccines are good for their child. One of the old misconceptions that I dealt with often in my office was the flu shot gives you the flu. I would present all the immunizations the child was due for that day, and they would say, "Doctor, I'll take all those vaccines, but not that flu shot because it gives you the flu." This is totally untrue. The flu shot is an inactivated or killed virus. A small amount is injected into the body to allow your body to make antibodies so that when you get exposed to the flu, either you don't get sick or you become more mildly ill than if you would have not been vaccinated.
Yeah, good. Now, it really is important to understand vaccinations, isn't it?
It is. It is. Some of the diseases, in fact, most of the diseases that vaccines prevent, we don't see anymore. So we're victims of our own success. Things like measles, which although it's come back, we rarely see it, mumps, chickenpox, diphtheria, polio, tetanus, all of those diseases are kind of a distant memory. So people forget about how serious they are. But just an example.
In my generation, we got all of those.
And I did too. If you were born before 1957, you're considered immune to measles, for example, because everyone got it.
Yeah.
And just an example of how serious measles can be. When I was preparing a vaccine talk, I told my neighbors, and they were very excited because my neighbor's brother, before vaccines were available for measles, developed measles, encephalitis, and permanent brain damage, and was disabled for his entire life.
Yeah.
So that's just, people think of those childhood diseases as being rather mild, but encephalitis and pneumonia were not that rare after measles.
Yeah, that's really important. So it is really significant to understand the significance of vaccinations.
Yes. The diseases are serious, vaccines work, and vaccines are safe. So it's important to keep yourself and your child vaccinated, not only for them, but for the community. There are people in our community, for example, newborns, who are too young to be vaccinated. And there are people who are immunosuppressed from cancer chemotherapy.
Yeah, I want to get into that. I want you to talk about vaccination rates for school-age children. And I think you make the argument that they're in decline. Is that correct?
Yes. We have some information from the Pennsylvania Department of Health School Immunization Law Report. So in the children entering kindergarten, and this is for receiving 2 doses of the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, in 2017-2018 school year, children entering kindergarten had a rate of 96.8%, so almost 97% of those children.
Wow.
But in 2022-2023, the rate had fallen to 94%. The other thing that's important to think about is there's been an increase in religious and philosophical exemptions to vaccine.
Exemptions. Yeah.
So you can have a medical exemption if, for instance, you're taking a medication that suppresses your immune system and you can't receive certain vaccines.
Yeah.
But people can say either it's against my religion or I have a strong philosophy.
Let's run to a break. When we come back, I want you to talk about the reasons for the decline. I think this is important to understand so that it can be dealt with. And we'll get to that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, my guest is Dr. Cynthia Demuth. She is on the Board of Trustees with the Pennsylvania Medical Society. We're talking about vaccines. What are they? Why are they important, among other things? And the fact of the matter is that let's talk about, is there a decline in the use of vaccines?
There has been. We did mention that children entering kindergarten for the first time have a decline overall in their 2 doses of measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine.
Right, but how about in general?
In general, there are more people that are questioning vaccines, and if you think about why that is, during the pandemic, some of the offices were closed or just open to the very youngest children, maybe infants, children under 2, so some of the children could not come in to get their regular checkups and receive their vaccines. And then with the speed with which the COVID vaccine was released and the federal emergency use authorization being a little different approval process, and people question just the technology of the mRNA and how fast it was released. And that led to questioning about other vaccines in general.
Sure.
Could COVID vaccine be unsafe? And then what about other vaccines?
Well, let's talk a little bit about school-age children. There's a decline there as well, correct? Mm-hmm. What are the major reasons for that decline? Obviously, the parents have to be heavily involved in those decisions.
Right. Some parents are concerned that vaccines aren't safe or that they're not needed because most people are immunized. We don't see these diseases anymore, and people forget about them. And there also are concerns such as MMR causing autism. This was, over the years, been in the news quite a bit. However, there have been 9 studies done by or sponsored by the CDC that have shown absolutely no relation of the MMR to autism. The MMR is given around age 1 year, and it is between 1 and 2 that children who are developing autistic spectrum disorder often start to show their symptoms, but it is not a cause and effect.
Now, what's on your website that folks would find interesting?
So the Medical Society is launching a campaign called Facts, Not Fear, and this is to try to dispel...
And by the way, not to interrupt you, but it's on our screen.
Yes. This is to dispel some of the myths about vaccines, so parents are welcome to go onto the website, and it will give you some ideas on questions you should ask your pediatrician or family physician about vaccines.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's really interesting how the ramifications are. What should be done by public officials and by medical personnel to make people feel more comfortable with getting a vaccine?
Well, I would like to explain a little bit about how vaccines are tested extensively before they're released. These are pharmaceuticals that are being given to not only healthy people, but infants. So the FDA and CDC are very careful about what they approve. There is an organization called the ACIP, Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, that is composed of different public health experts and physicians, and they will approve the vaccine, and then CDC will put it on the schedule. But even after it's been tested and thought to be safe and effective, further testing goes on after the vaccine is in use. So we have things like VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. So anyone, a patient, a physician, a medical person, can report a side effect they had from a vaccine. And these are studied to see, is there a pattern, is there something rare that has occurred that was not anticipated, and in some cases the vaccine is withdrawn from the market when that happens.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you. I think this is an extremely important subject to deal with, vaccines, and you have an assignment. The assignment is, if there are changes that you think are worth talking about, please come back on the program. All right. Well, we're going to. What's that?
I would love to.
Great. Well, we're going to go from vaccines to the importance of financial education. Extremely important topic. We'll get to that and more soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by CrossState Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, financial education is extremely important. We're going to talk about why, and then here's a topic that I want to hear more about: teaching kids about money. Joining me to do that is Bill Brown. He's the CEO of the Citadel Credit Union, and Patrick Conway. He's the president and CEO of CrossState Credit Union Association. All right, Patrick, financial education, you call it Financial Education 101. So that's like a first-year course in a college, right?
I guess that's a good way to describe it. You know, financial education is important to Americans all over the country, and certainly to our families and our communities. And now that we're sort of in back-to-school season, it's a good time to talk about financial education. You know, 64% of Americans really are living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. And working with our youth to sort of train them to save money is an important part of their financial future.
Yeah, that's really important. And there's another aspect to this that I think is also important, as someone who spent most of his career teaching young people, teaching kids about money.
Yeah,
teaching kids about money.
That's
Explain
exactly
that.
right. These good habits start early in life around financial discipline, and whether as a parent with children or even for ourselves as we grew up, the idea that we get an allowance for doing chores around the house or for doing extra work, the basics of financial services includes things like budgeting and cash flow, and we don't use those terms with children. Yeah. But we certainly can help children understand that these habits, these good hygiene habits, developed early in life, lead to long-term benefits as we mature into adults.
And people make mistakes.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think for many parents with their children, when you give an allowance, you have to allow children the experience of trying to figure out the difference between their wants versus their needs, and allow them to experiment.
It's a learning. It can be a learning experience if they make a mistake.
That's exactly right. And I think that for many of our kids across Pennsylvania and certainly across the country, this idea that they have access to tools on their smartphones and the like to help with budgeting again, this idea of helping children develop these good habits early on.
Yeah. Well, I want to run to a break, and when we return, I want to talk about savings, the importance of savings, something that I don't think gets emphasized enough, but you're the expert on this. You'll tell me. Back soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
All right, Patrick Conway, let's talk about something that is not always easy to do. It's savings, but it's extremely important, isn't it?
You know, it really is. It's almost like a muscle memory. If you start early as a youth and you're taught the importance of saving, obviously it's the most essential building block of building future wealth and just having a healthy financial life ahead of you as you move into adulthood. So the importance of savings is important, and sometimes we don't talk about it with our kids as much as we should. And so talk about it and set a good example for your kids, and that will go a long way too.
Yeah. So what you refer to as building healthy saving habits for children is extremely important.
Absolutely. You know, and you think of kids who are involved with athletics and certain activities, they talk about muscle memory and, repetitive motion in athletics and things like that. It's the same when it comes to discipline and planning for your financial future.
All right. There's, for all of us, and I just don't want to say for children, there's a want and there's a need, a want and a need. Explain that.
Yeah, so, when you think about how you allocate your funds, whether it's your paycheck or for children allowances, we have wants and we have needs, and needs are the things that help us live our lives. It's food and shelter. It's paying the electric bill and the cable bill. And wants are, the 12th T-shirt in the closet. Wants are, hey, I want to buy a new pair of skis. Well, being able to teach children, in particular earlier on, the difference between wants and needs really helps them to formulate later on in life a plan for, as they're earning money, how they start to save more and put aside more. Yeah. And some of the statistics are alarming around people not having enough funds to cover short-term emergencies. And that's why we're so committed to the idea that we have to get in front of this and start helping children understand the basics of money management.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about emergency funds and the fact that they can take the stress out of unexpected expenses.
Right, unexpected expenses, there's studies out there that says many Americans don't have an extra $400 or $500 in their account if they do have an unexpected crisis. Yeah. And that's a problem. So again, it goes back to, I think, early training, coaching for youth, preparing them for a healthy financial future. You can save for your needs and you can save for emergencies. And you can also save for your wants. That's right. So if you want those new pair of skis and you're a kid, you can set up a savings.
And I have to mention golf clubs.
And golf clubs, absolutely. But it's a nice incentive to see that money building each week so that you can make the payment when you're ready to make the purchase.
Where does should folks, young people in particular, get this information? Should that be taught more in schools or in private sector?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think this is where it's a public-private partnership between those of us who work in financial services, our association, credit unions, banks around the state, as well as, if you ask me, I firmly believe that as part of our education curriculum, there should be a course taught to students around financial education to help prepare them for what happens later on in life.
I mean, that's the significance of it. This is something that you have to live with, not just a couple of years, but through your entire livelihood, correct?
Right. And so I think it starts at home with your family and your parents. but also your trusted financial institution, your credit union, community bank. And I think there's a place for it in schools as well. I agree with Bill. You know, financial reality fairs are a good way to teach kids, and a fun way to teach kids how to manage their funds.
Yeah. And parents are supposed to act as a creditor, correct? Are supposed to talk about savings, don't live beyond your means.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the role, I think, as Patrick alluded to, the idea of parents being the role models for what does good financial common sense look like, and what is the right behaviors. And the parents, in many cases, can sort of demonstrate to their children what it looks like in the real world in financial services. They can lend their children money. They can help their children understand a little bit more about savings, and even the role of the time value of money and how it contributes to building long-term financial success.
Yeah, one of the things we don't talk about very much is budgeting for the long term. You know, we live paycheck by paycheck, many people, week by week, month by month, but not over the long haul.
Well, and I think that's at the core of the importance of saving. If you learn to save early on, you reduce the stress of preparing for that long-term savings plan.
Yeah. While we're talking about young people, parents are supposed to be creditors as well as spenders, correct?
That is exactly right. And
talk about that.
Yeah. So I think for many parents, what they need to understand is that they play an important role in helping their children understand what does the real world look like in terms of your credit rating, and how much of your ability to achieve your financial goals depend on that credit rating. And so developing these healthy habits around how and when you use credit. What's the smart use of credit? What does it mean when you enter into a lending relationship with a financial institution? That can sort of be mimicked, if you will, between parents and their children in terms of borrowing and spending.
Yeah. Now, overall, this is a very serious problem, isn't it?
It really is. You know, when you think about the percentage of Americans that aren't prepared for retirement or the financial future, it all begins at home, starting early and instilling good, habits when it comes to financial management, teaching kids the importance of those life skills.
Yeah. And does this start in the home? I mean, it seems to me this is just not a question for home. It's a question for the schools and for home and other things.
Yeah, to me, this is a long-term drip campaign. This isn't a one and done, one time around the kitchen table. It's multi-channel.
Okay, thank you. This was a fabulous update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.